This is going to be another one of those big epic funny videos where I need to spoiler warning my spoiler warning. So first off, this video will contain spoilers for the entire numbered Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy. And then also, I'm going to need to spoil the other thing I need to spoil, which I will do in 3, 2, 1. Also, full spoilers for the Xenosaga series. I'm under the impression that these games are going to get some sort of remaster or re-release within the next couple of years, so if you're interested in playing those completely blind for the first time when that happens, you might want to sit this one out. This video is basically going to have two parts. The first is going to be exactly what it says in the title and thumbnail, discussing how Noah and Mio might be ultimately more important to the world of Xeno now that the potential saga connections have been brought in, and the second is going to be sort of a semi-response, semi-offering a different take on a couple things I said in the radio video discussing the Xenosaga connection for the first time, basically just responding to some people's commentary on my interpretation of events and offering a different take in that. So there'll be chapters separating that stuff up in the description. Check out whichever one you want to check out. Just keep in mind, if you came here for the Noah and Mio thing, it's not going to be the full runtime of this video. So then, first off, Noah, Mio, and their friends, while they're generally well-liked by the community, are sometimes regarded as not being very important to the story of the series in the long run when compared to the parties from Xenoblade 1 and 2, basically due to the fact that Ionios is stuck in one blip of time and is effectively undone at the end of things. Now, yes, the ending of Xenoblade 3 is fairly ambiguous, and we don't know exactly who and how many memories from Ionios are retained, but we do get a pretty good idea that Noah and Mio at least do still subconsciously remember each other at least, and that's what happens in the post-credit scene where you go back to young Noah. While a bunch of different incarnations of Noah and Mio throughout the history of Ionios are clearly important to shaping that world to how it is, and ultimately in breaking out of the Endless now, the fact still remains that because Ionios only takes place in the one blip of time, the history of the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 post the ending of those games aren't substantially affected by 3 and the intersection and all of that even occurring. So, while they were important to the one thing they didn't really do a lot in terms of the grand scheme of things. This is a valid criticism, but I think Future Redeemed, even without taking the Xenosaga connections into account, does turn it on its head. All we get from the main game are platitudes by the main party and the two queens that, yeah, Kevis and Agnes will try to come and see each other at some point, or meet up again, or get back in contact, despite the fact that the worlds need to split up again, and yeah, that just leads to the ambiguity of the ending, because we don't know if they do that, but then the post-credit scene of Future Redeemed exists, and we can see the two worlds interlinking together and reforming into something resembling planet Earth. So, not only does this mean that they did get to see each other again, but the two worlds did in fact become one. All of my old videos from like 2019 about how Xenoblade 1 and 2 ended in the same world technically became true. It just took like 5 years real time, an additional game's worth of story, and 20 to 25 years in universe for that to happen. I was objectively wrong, but I was less wrong than I could have been, so I will still take that as a W. Or half W. I'll take a V. Anyway, based on the contents of the post-credit scene of the main game, and Mio's last monologue over her journal if you save it after beating the game, we can reasonably say that even if nobody else does, Noah and Mio do have at least subconscious memories of Ionios and of each other, and that would be the potential catalyst for the worlds recombining. As I've said before, the post-credit scene of Future Redeemed does not have any reasonable timescale given. The only backdrop we have is space, which is famous for not changing very quickly, so we do not know how long after the end of the main game, or after the beginning of the main game technically, because Ionios is an Endless now, it was one instant, we don't know how long it takes for the worlds to recombine after they separate from being Ionios. However, I'm gonna say it is within the lifespans of Noah and Mio. I said this in my last video, but I'm gonna reiterate this here in case you didn't see that. It would be very, very stupid for them to explicitly show the two worlds connecting again, and then have it have taken so long that Noah and Mio would be dead by the time that happened and they would never get to see each other. I think that would be very disrespectful to the characters and also just kind of defeat the point of the ending of Xenoblade 3. So, while the recombination might not have happened exactly after the post-credit scene, and maybe Noah disappearing in the main game's post-credit scene was a mistake to begin with, or just symbolic, and representing him remembering Mio or something like that, the point remains that even if them immediately remembering isn't what caused the worlds to recombine, those two would definitely be the ones leading the charge on the two different sides to get them to connect back with each other, and now we know as a fact they succeeded. So, yeah, outside of Ionios, this is clearly an indication of something they did that caused meaningful change to the world. And then you have to remember the rest of the ramifications of the future redeemed post-credit scene. And remember that it's because of Noah and Mio that any of that stuff happened. Because that post-credit scene showed that not only the Xenoblade 1 world, but also the Xenoblade 2 world were vague pocket dimensions centered around the space where Klaus's Earth used to be. We originally had all thought that Allrest was just the explicit ruins of Klaus's Earth, and one was a pocket dimension connected to it via the conduit, but it appears that was not the case, and they were both pocket dimensions, with Earth itself just not being there anymore. And then, after the two worlds interlink, a planet visually resembling Earth is restored in Earth's original place. And then Cosmos lands there. So let's talk about the ramifications of that. For those of you who need a refresher, or just didn't care about the spoiler warning with regards to Xenosaga, Earth is a very, very important place in that series, even though humanity has long since left it behind. To grossly oversimplify Saga lore, after it was discovered in the 21st century in Kenya, experiments with the Zohar were carried out, even after an incident causing one of the researchers' daughters to disappear occurred, eventually leading to the same disappearance phenomenon extending across the entire planet. Humanity was able to escape, including taking the Zohar with them, and in order to keep the phenomenon from spreading across the entire universe, series villain Wilhelm did something to seal it away. It is never explained exactly what he did, but he sure did do something there. And the cause of this phenomenon was known as a matter shift, or a phase transition. Those terms should sound very important to you. Just hint, hint, nudge, nudge. The planet was eventually renamed to Lost Jerusalem, and even the way to get to where it's supposed to be was unknown. There are also several different in-universe theories on its disappearance, since it's not even explicitly explained to the player exactly what happened, with the leading theory that it was, quote, shrunk down to Planck scale, or basically made very, very tiny as something can possibly be while still existing in the universe. If we take Xenoblade to be canon, that's probably not the case, but given that it apparently physically was not present there, that's not an unreasonable thing to assume, especially since weird shrinking and growing stuff does exist elsewhere in the Saga universe. There are a few flashbacks that take place there. Chaos was obviously around for that, as well as previous incarnations of Xion and Cosmos, and Renlu Chateau, which is an area that was specifically taken away from Lost Jerusalem and is just a chunk of Earth out there in space somewhere, is an important location, and a bunch of different factions, mainly villainous during the main series, are trying to get back there because they think there's something important about Lost Jerusalem. And then, at the end of the series, after Wilhelm has been defeated and his plan of eternal recurrence is stopped, the universe is still in danger. Wilhelm has been causing eternal recurrence in each cycle of existence to reset it back to the beginning of time in order to keep things from collapsing. And while that is wiping out everyone in the universe and forcing them to start over again eventually, now that he's been stopped, that collapse is still going to occur. Because of all the Gnosis gathered on planet Mictum where the finale of episode 3 takes place, that collapse is about to start immediately, but Nephilim, Abel, and Chaos take the Zohar and bring it off to Lost Jerusalem in order to try and fix things. I'm going to read Chaos's last line in this specific cutscene just straight up verbatim because it's kind of very important. The only context you need to know is they're about to warp out, and Xion asks what's going to happen to the universe. Chaos, don't worry. When we disappear, the speed of this universe's destruction will slow down, but we can't stop the destruction itself. At best, this universe will last another few tens of thousands of years before it perishes. Listen to me, Xion. The key to saving all lies in the land of origin, Lost Jerusalem. I and the Gnosis, the wills of countless people, will all return there. For mankind to survive, you must do what must be done in this universe, and come find Lost Jerusalem. Shion, I know you and the others can do that. So between the powers of Animus and Anima and the Zohar, the universe has been bought a stay of execution, one long enough for humanity to be able to do whatever nebulous thing they need to in order to save everything. And the key to doing that lies back on Earth, on Lost Jerusalem, on a planet that Chaos and Nephilim earlier refers to very specifically as the land of, and I quote, origin. The end of the game then sees Shion, Jr., Alan, and the crew of the Elsa go on a journey to try and find Lost Jerusalem, while the rest of the party and other important characters stay on the Damarung to try and reconnect the universe now that the UMN is gone. Post-credits, we see the incredibly iconic scene of Cosmos' torso drifting through space towards a planet that appears to be Earth. But hold on, wait a minute. Yeah, the whole warping to Lost Jerusalem thing did happen, and Cosmos was defending them at the time, so her ending up near there and eventually drifting to that spot makes perfect sense. But the coordinates to get there being lost, and the planet itself being sealed away by Wilhelm, are two very different things. And we don't know that Wilhelm dying would undo the sealing he did, so Earth probably shouldn't be there unless something else happened. And hey, you know what happened in a set of games that are now being tied into Xenosaga that resulted in Earth, which had been screwed up as well, coming back? Yeah, Noah and Mio reconnecting with each other. So, not only did they allow everyone from the Xenoblade 1 and 2 world to come back together, they've also resulted in some unknown key being accessible to the outside universe. And that's kind of a big deal, because not only did they directly save everyone from Bionis and Alres from being stuck in Ionios for all eternity, but they also indirectly saved the entire Saga universe from collapsing. And we've been told that Bionis and Alres weren't particularly densely populated. Well, there's a Galaxy Federation out there in Saga that's now also being saved that has a whole bunch of different planets with a whole bunch of different people with a whole bunch of cities that are as big or even bigger than the Radamanthus Authority we see in Future Redeemed. So yeah, their actions and their memories of each other are definitely contributing to helping out a whole lot more people than they even knew when they broke out of Ionios. And then there's the fact that there's a specific key on Lost Jerusalem. Now, again, keep in mind, the actual surface area of Bionis, Mechonis, and Aurist are way smaller compared to the entirety of Earth, and it appeared to be an entire planet Earth coming back there at the end of Future Redeemed. So there's a big planet to explore. Talked about this in a different video that didn't even talk about the Saga connections. There's a lot of stuff that nobody from the two worlds would know anything about on this new planet at the end of Future Redeemed. So there's a bunch of different places for the key to be. The key could also literally just be the Zohar being brought back there, and yeah, that is one of the big contradictions between connecting Saga and Blade. How did the conduit remain in the Xenoblade 2 Pocket Dimension while the Zohar was out there doing Xenosaga things out in deep space? But that's besides the point. We might have an idea of what the key to saving all of this stuff is. The universe was collapsing because of a critical mass of human consciousnesses being there, and the fact that 2 planets worth of people got brought into the main universe from Pocket Dimensions after Future Redeemed probably made that issue a little bit bigger, especially because that was also Earth, where all the Gnosis were going to. So that could be an issue. But it kept being referred to as the Land of Origin. That's what Chaos, a guy who kind of knows a lot about the cosmology of Xenosaga, keeps referring to Lost Jerusalem as. Like, Lost Jerusalem, that's the human name for it. Land of Origin, that's the very talented person name for it. So clearly there's some meaning to the name. And this might sound a little wacky and retconny, but honestly this is kind of the opposite of a retcon. The whole term Land of Origin and this key idea were never elaborated on in Xenosaga itself, so they would just be taking that idea and running with it when making Xenoblade 3. And we can tell based on the founder statues that at least the vague idea of Future Redeemed was already in people's minds when they finalized the story for the main game, so I'm pretty sure that the name Origin for the arc to save everyone in Xenoblade 3 was intentionally chosen based on Chaos calling Earth the Land of Origin back in Xenosaga 3, because I'm pretty sure that even when they were making the base game, they already knew that they were going to try and make these Saga connections. So, the key could be a bunch of different things. It could be the Trinity processor. It could be some knowledge about how Earth used to be. That doesn't really make sense because Chaos could just provide that knowledge himself because he was there as well. It could be something to properly unlock the powers of Animus and Anima. It could be another relic of God that was not taken off planet at all and would be allowed to use the Zohar to do something bigger or contact Udu better or something like that. But I think the technology behind Origin would be a good candidate for that key. Origin can store people and their souls through the collapse of a universe. Chaos's idea for saving everyone might not be preventing the collapse, but outlasting it by storing everyone in Origin and having the universe be rebuilt or something like that. So, yeah. I'd say, in a cosmic sense, Noah and Mio are way, way more important now than we initially gave them credit for. But that is just part 1 of the video. Part 2 is going to discuss something that I've seen people criticize my theories about Saga and Blade being connected with. And that's regards to time dilation inside the pocket dimensions. I do think it's very hard to argue that 1 and 2 don't take place in 2 pocket dimensions at this point. However, I could see why the idea that time in those pocket dimensions would need to be running way, way faster than in the outside world for any of the Saga Blade connections to make sense. I can see how that would be a sticking point in actually believing that theory. Basically, roughly 4,500 years have taken place in the Xenosaga universe since Earth was abandoned and became Lost Jerusalem, while we know as a fact in both the universes of 1 and 2, significantly more time than that has passed. Evolution started up again in the Xenoblade 2 universe as a result of Cloud seeding Cloud Sea with core crystals, and 1's affinity chart outright includes NPCs who have been alive for twice that long, and Zanza says he reset the universe several times. Now, I don't know if Zanza actually did reset the universe, or if he was just making stuff up there, or if that did actually reset time like Wilhelm's eternal recurrence, so only the roughly 10 to 15,000 years of one cycle of the universe actually took place there. And there is the fact that Klaus seeding the Cloud Sea with core crystals would probably make evolution happen faster, and especially make things turn into humans faster, because we already know from Staniff's analysis of Blade DNA that's very close to human DNA. But there's still very, very explicit things showing that much more than 4,500 years have passed in both of those universes, which means a significant amount of time dilation must occur for all of this stuff to make sense. Except there is one other theory, and the only reason I didn't bring this one up is because I personally don't like the idea of it. Because you could just assume that no time dilation has happened at all. When Chaos brought the Gnosis and the Zohar to Lost Jerusalem, he didn't bring them to a planet at that time. Earth was still gone, it was just the Zohar floating in space with a bunch of Gnosis there, while the 2 Xenoblade worlds were off in their pocket dimensions, and whenever Shulk recreated his universe at the end of Xenoblade 1, it created enough cracks for some of the Gnosis to slip in there in the form of the Fog King and Fog Beasts. Then those Fog Beasts obviously carried over into Ionios when that happened, and that would explain all that stuff. As well as the fact that Bionis and Aura's histories were way longer, so that Earth did eventually come back into existence, but Chaos and the Gnosis had been chilling there for a pretty long time, several millennia, by the time that happened. This is actually somewhat supported by the appearance of Cosmos. During the credits, when she's talking to Chaos and says goodnight and goes to sleep, she appears just as blue and vibrantly colored as she does in the rest of the game when she's in that form. In the post-credit scene, when she's drifting to Earth, however, her appearance is much more bleached looking and faded, suggesting that a long time has happened where she's been exposed to, like, radiation from different stars and space and stuff. So theoretically, she could have just been drifting through space for however many thousands of years it would take between the amount of time it took for Xenosaga's lore to happen and the amount of time it would take for all of the Xenoblade lore to happen. This is completely reasonable, especially because Xenosaga was originally envisioned as an anthology with the characters of Cosmos and Chaos being the only recurring people across the entire series. And yes, of course, Chaos would still be around if that big time jump happened, because he's Chaos, he can do that, he is in fact that talented. But in that case, why don't I like this idea? Well, that's because at the end of Xenosaga 3, Xion and Cosmos have an emotional farewell scene where they talk about how they will definitely meet again no matter what, and they will see each other, they'll be gone for only a short time, and even Junior saying goodbye to Momo says something along those lines as well. So the idea that Cosmos makes it back to Earth thousands of years later, and there's no indication that anyone from space had made it to that reformed Lost Jerusalem before her, means that Xion and friends were long, long dead, and if the Elsa ever did make it to Earth, it would be piloted by hundreds of generations, thousands of years later after her, so she and Cosmos would never get that reunion. And yeah, obviously reincarnation exists. She could be born again at some other point and meet Cosmos, who had not been reincarnated this time, and that would still work, but I don't like the fact that not including time dilation means that Xion and Cosmos will never meet again, despite making a promise at the end of the game, in the same continuity where Noah and Mio will get to meet again after making a very, very similar promise. I think that kind of goes against the themes of Xenoblade 3. At the end of the game, Xion says, "We're creatures that are much more flawed, weak, and smaller than that. We hurt others, we lie to ourselves, we hate, we blame others, we regret. But even if we are weak, and even if it is our fate to disappear entirely, I think the will to change the future is still an important one. We must try to change the things around us little by little, even if it is one step at a time, and even if everything is already predetermined, it's not something for us to be sad about. No, on the contrary, the future is overflowing with hope." That is arguably the most Xenoblade thing anyone in Xenosaga says, and I think it would be very, very strange for all of that hope to come for nothing and just have her and everyone she's with die of old age at some point in space when they get maybe 1% of the way to where they're actually going. And while the anthology with Cosmos and Chaos idea is really cool, I don't like the idea of sacrificing Xenosaga characters for Xenoblade, especially when, from what we've seen so far, the connection is treating both franchises with as much respect as possible. So, while that is 100% a possibility and something they could easily do writing-wise and easily justify lore-wise, possibly even more justifiable than the time dilation thing I keep suggesting, I personally dislike that as a writing choice, so until we get confirmation either way, I'm going to choose to believe in the other one, and hope that we'll see the Elsa come to this new Lost Jerusalem a few years after Cosmos, and her with her new Shulkin Torah-built body is going to have the reunion she deserves. Till next time though, this is Luxon, signing off.